Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Spell Like Hotcakes, a Widow's Bay novel, by Rebecca Regnier, narrated by Traci Odom. Chapter 1. Get as much B-roll as possible. The baked goods, the signage, yep. I instructed my photographer/intern, Taylor Jean Cadillac, yep, that's her name, to get the shots I needed. Taylor was all legs, all energy, and at an age where, when she sat on the floor, she could pop back up again without concerning herself with consequences. Taylor was in my life thanks to the expansion of Your UP News. The online source for news was now on cable. My boss had made a deal to secure broadcasts on several cable companies that broadcast in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And I got the new photographer, thanks to my repeated rescuing of my boss, Garrett DeWitt. I saved his periodically furry backside on the regular, and now I was in charge of a small staff at the Widow's Bay Bureau of Your UP News. I would like to claim my superior reporting skill also led to my rise in the company, but I had come through for Garrett in unexpected ways. So now my new titles were Bureau Chief and Lead Reporter. Not only did I have the willowy Taylor, cub photographer, to shoot my video, but also every other day I had a full-time producer. Garrett had doubled my staff with the stroke of a pen. Pretty magical, and I didn't have to find the eye of Newt to make it happen, though I could do that too if needs be. It was a new thing, having a staff and sharing an office. Thank goodness I was the boss, such as it was, since the staff members were all the same age as my kids. When I was a news anchor in Detroit, after I turned 35, my bosses were usually a decade younger than me, which was irritating. I got older, they got younger, and somehow they all knew best about how to do my job. Here I was able to lead this small but mighty little band of young journalists, and my boss, Garrett, deferred to my experience. It was a rare setup in news. I knew it, I appreciated it, and I thanked the goddess every day that it had worked out like this. My producer was almost family. I'd hired my friend Georgianne's son, Jacob. Jacob was a freshly minted journalism graduate, home from college. Journalism jobs were few and far between, but Jacob was willing to work here in our tiny town for a starting wage. And work he did, like crazy. It was the end of the summer, and so a lot of the younger generation of Widow's Bay was in attendance for today's announcement in the town square. Late summer meant colleges were in the summer break, and the usually empty nests of my friends were full for the time being. The next big festival was about to kick off. The details had been tightly guarded. We were celebrating August Eve, I knew that much. But the details would be today's story for Your UP News. Mayor Candy Hitchcock and Pauline Rogers, real estate agent, fitness instructor, and all-around dynamo, were spearheading the planning and were excited to unveil the details. I spotted Candy's son and daughter. Tatum was there with her son Zach. Fawn and her boys were there. They were all ears for Pauline. Mayor Candy Hitchcock stepped to the lectern microphone. Our news microphone was up there, along with one from M Live, my only competition now that mancavenews.net was defunct. It was hot, and I wished I'd ditched my standard-issued black blazer and jeans for something lighter. Candy looked impeccable, as usual. Her blonde bob haircut was sprayed into submission, her crisp white blouse was brighter than the sun, and her linen yellow straight skirt had nary a wrinkle. She'd added a huge black beaded statement necklace to match her black peep-toe pumps. I marveled at how cool she looked. She was made for events like this. Widow's Bay is famous for celebrating Celtic folklore, as you all know. We kicked off this historic town renaissance last fall with the first All Souls Festival. Since that time, we've enjoyed revitalized tourism, new businesses opening, older establishments expanding, and our previous budget deficit has turned into a surplus. We've been able to expand police, fire, and road crews. All thanks to the success of the Samhain Slopes, the microbrewery at the Frog Toe, and the vibrant restaurant scene, Widow's Bay is well on its way to becoming to Celtic holidays what Frankenmuth is to Christmas. Frankenmuth, under the bridge in the lower peninsula, celebrated Christmas year-round. Widow's Bay, about as north as you could get in the U.S., celebrated a Celtic holiday every month or so. The town had leaned into its reputation for witchcraft, vampires, and werewolves, and, as Candy said, that had paid off. As you know, our next festival is August Eve, and in that spirit, we're excited to let you know the final piece that will make this event our most successful yet. I continued to take in the crowd and watched as they listened intently to Candy's speech. Without further ado, let me introduce Pauline Rogers, chairwoman of the organizing committee for August Eve. Pauline stepped up to the microphone to polite applause, her toned arms letting us know that she might have a smile on her face, but she was driven to succeed, just like Candy. Their combined will had turned the town around. As you know, August Eve is a celebration of the wheat harvest, or Lunasa, which is hard to say, and spell, I know. Anyway, we thought what better way to honor wheat than a bake-off competition. But this won't be just any bake-off. I'm proud to announce the August Eve Pasty Bake-Off. Well, that was something. Perfect, actually. The polite applause had moved up a notch to enthusiastic. Wait. What are pasties? Taylor asked me. She was from Toledo, Ohio. She could tell you all about ponchki, but not a thing about pasties. Pasties. Rhymes with nasty, don't forget. They're portable meat pies and a tradition around here. Ah, I thought they were the things strippers wore. Same spelling, but if you mix it up around here, you'll never be taken seriously as a journalist, or human, really, again. Got it. Pasty like nasty, meat pies. Pauline continued on, and I had to admit it was a brilliant idea. Celebrating this Upper Peninsula delicacy and honoring the wheat harvest is, we believe, a perfect marriage of ideas. Pasties are a food staple of this region, and yet there isn't a competition that celebrates them. We're setting up the August Eve Pasty Bake-Off as the first and premier way to honor this delicious food, brought here by copper miners in the 1800s. I made a note to have Jacob run down the history of the pasty in Michigan, though usually when I made a suggestion, he was already 2 steps ahead of me. Though the signature dish of the Upper Peninsula inspires road trips and pasty trail camping, there isn't a competition to honor the best pasty in the state. Until now. This really was brilliant, and after listening to my friends hype the event, all signs indicated that the August Eve Pasty Bake-Off was going to be huge for Widow's Bay tourism. Though there was a lot of cheerleading and positive spin at this event, I knew that the town was suffering right now. There had been a sharp economic downturn in the last few weeks thanks to a raging werewolf stampede and vampire versus witch showdown. It all worked out in the end. Vampire vanquished and shifters cured. But the rumors that the cute cosplay monsters were actually real monsters had caused families to keep their packed minivans downstate in the back half of this summer. Widow's Bay needed a win. To get that win, I knew my little distinguished ladies' club would pull out all the stops. We were widows, witches, divorcees, but more than that, we were savvy businesswomen. We'd get the job done. As Pauline outlined the details of turning the downtown into a battleground for bakers, I thought about how much she and my coven had overcome. Pauline, like most of my closest friends, was a widow. But while Pauline's Darius had died of a heart attack, the majority of the recently departed husbands of Widow's Bay had died when a charity bus plunged off a bridge. 13 members of Widow's Bay's Football Parents Club had died. Pauline's brood wasn't able to get back for her big speech, but here the coven was family, and the rest of us were here providing that applause and moral support. It was clear to me that Candy was nurturing Pauline to be the next mayor, not that Candy was stepping down. Pauline had taken a more serious leadership role lately, though. That appeared not to be an accident. Pauline explained the history of the pasty, pronounced past tea, and not to be confused with the bits of adhesive boob covering. People in the Upper Peninsula lived for the perfect pasty. Pasty loyalty ran hot and deep. Arguing about the best place to get a pasty was more common than arguing about the Packers versus the Lions. Widow's Bay August Eve Pasty Bake-Off winners will have the distinct honor of letting the world know they have the best pasty in Michigan, Pauline explained. There would also be a cash prize to be named later. I noted that, in my coverage, that would be important too. If Pauline wanted the best of the best to roll dough in August in Widow's Bay, on short notice, the purse would have to be decent. Then I started wondering about the heat involved on Main Street when they all fired up ovens for this event. That would be one for the organizers to deal with. It's often joked that the UP has 2 seasons, winter and July. We were heading into August now, and the heat was on. It was glorious. The heat of summer in a place that was usually socked in with snow until May turned us all a little giddy. Pauline did a wonderful job speaking. She represented the town beautifully, and Candy generously let the spotlight shine on Pauline. It was what women did here, fixed each other's crowns. I was proud of that. They finished the official speeches, and Taylor and I headed for Candy first to get an interview for the Your UP news story. Candy stood with her 2 kids, home for a brief spell and dutifully appearing with their mother. Candy's son was clean-cut, with a razor-sharp jaw and a very similar look to his dad. He was Captain America personified. But Steve Hitchcock was his mother's son. The 2 never fought, and if Candy had a favorite, Steve was it. Her relationship with her daughter, well, that was best in small doses, according to my friend. I didn't have daughters, and when I listened to Candy's experiences with hers, I realized sometimes that was a good thing. Candy's daughter was the opposite of her on all things. She was a free spirit. While Candy wore her crisp professional attire in all scenarios, even at exercise class, her daughter looked like she was headed to Woodstock or the Burning Man Festival. Today, Gabrielle wore a cream-colored off-the-shoulder peasant top and paisley print flowing skirt. Her long blonde curls were a riot around her face. She really looked like Candy, but she did everything she could, including a nose piercing and several tattoos on her arms and legs, to distance herself from that resemblance. Pretty as they both were, they couldn't look more different. Candy loved her, of course, but the 2 were like oil and water. It was easy for me to appreciate Gabby's ebullient and rebellious spirit, because I wasn't in charge of her curfew, or paying the lawyers for the minor in possession of alcohol ticket she got when she left for college. Candy stood with her 2 night-and-day children at her side and answered my questions. We've learned a lot about the impact these events have on city services. The focus for Widow's Bay Police, Fire, and our other essential infrastructure will be to provide a safe, festive, and clean environment for visitors. I've been in several calls with the mayor of Frankenmuth and have received advice on how to adjust during the ebb and flow of big events. Thanks, Candy. Taylor, I think we're good for interviews. A few more shots of the sample pasties? Taylor nodded and did as I instructed. How long are you both in town? I asked Gabby and Steve. I'm heading back to the Citadel tomorrow morning. Steve was studying engineering and planned to enter military service after graduation. I looked at Gabby. I plan to head to Hash Bash. Candy's jaw clenched. A playful smile lit Gabby's eyes and curled the corners of her mouth. While marijuana is legal, it does not reflect well on your family if you partake in— Mom, chill, I'm kidding. Hash Bash is in April. I was there already. You just didn't know. I'm kidding. You're always trying to get a rise out of me, Candy said, and her jaw unclenched, though I suppose that took effort. I'm just hanging, Aunt Marzie. Not sure, but thanks for asking. She squeezed her mom around the shoulders and flitted off to find adventure, trouble, or a joint. Maybe all 3. You know her pottery is being featured at Art Fair, Steve told his mother. What? Why didn't she tell me? Because I think it's more fun to see you get a little unhinged, I offered, and Steve nodded yes at my observation. I left them to their family discussion and found Fawn. Taylor was by my side, ready to shoot an interview if needed. As I approached Fawn and her brood, all sons, I noticed a few of their eyes following my young, beautiful intern. Fawn's family dynamic was one I could relate better to. It was all sons, big dogs, and football when it came to Fawn and her crew. Fawn's sons were all beautiful iterations of her. Cole was a park ranger at Hiawatha National Forest. Rain was studying to be a veterinarian like his mom, and Bodie worked at the casino with Fawn's dad. They didn't make it back to Widow's Bay much. It was nice to see them all. And, for a change, Grady was nowhere to be found. Which was a little odd, since lately when I saw Fawn, he wasn't far behind. "Where's Grady?" I'm not sure. But it's nice just to spend time with my boys, I know. I didn't know how far Grady and Fawn had progressed, or if they were even officially a thing. Telling your son about your boyfriend was awkwardly reminiscent of telling your dad that you had a boyfriend when you were a teen. Men. Tatum and her son Zach had already cut out of the event. Zach was learning about brewing and distilling to take over the Frog Toe one day. Tatum didn't like to be away from the brew pub for too long. I wondered if Zach knew about Tatum's relationship with Mario, her vampire bouncer and assistant manager. I had to figure if he didn't, it was because he was blind or in denial. My boys had accepted Brûlé as my, special friend. Things sure had changed fast in all of our lives. "I think we're done," I said to Taylor. Jacob, Georgianne's boy, and my new producer decided that, in fact, we weren't quite done. "You need to shoot a stand-up," Jacob Paris instructed me as his mom approached. "He'll be a news director before I know it," I said to Georgianne. "Yeah?" She beamed at her son. Jacob just edged Georgianne out on height by a good couple inches. That wasn't easy to do. At 5'11" and with flame-red hair, Georgianne stood out. At a lanky 6'4", Jacob's hair was more auburn than red. Georgianne's late husband was only 5'6". I was wistful for a moment, thinking about how he would have looked with his tall drink-of-water son. My neck was hurting looking up at Georgianne, Jacob, and Taylor. Jacob was eager to do well and was easy to train as a new producer. And he was right. I hadn't shot a stand-up. I was just getting used to the fact that your UP News wanted video stories, just like my old television station, along with articles for their website. I worried some days that this would lead to my demise at the job, seeing as I was now 40, white-haired, and Botox-averse. "Better get to it. You know how Garrett and Justin said that's key. You're the star reporter," Jacob said, and I rolled my eyes. Your son is turning into an exacting producer. Thanks for loaning him to me. I embraced Georgianne, and she hugged me back. "Stand there, with the pasty display in the background." I looked over to Jacob, and he was instructing Taylor on what he wanted. "I better get after it, then." "Jacob, I'm making pork roast. If you want to, stop by," Georgianne said to her son. Jacob waved his hand at his mother. He was immersed in work for your UP News. I commiserated with my friend for a beat. It's weird. I'd gotten used to not having him around, and now I'm regressing, making food and stuff. I know, right? It's like you get an empty nest for a hot second, and then they all fly back in. Or dive bomb in is more accurate. They couldn't wait to leave. And then they come back when they realize, oh yeah, it's awesome when my mom does everything for me. Georgianne nodded in agreement. I'd had varying levels of the same thing since Sam and Joe had returned. Joe was fairly self-sufficient, learning how to be a vampire and in management training at Samhain Slopes with Brûlé. Sam had a new girlfriend every week. But still, no matter what they were doing, there was laundry. I recorded an introduction to the story as Jacob insisted. Great, let's get you to do a tag, too. I normally wouldn't get myself on camera as much as this, But with Jacob in the field reminding Taylor and me to do this, we did. I looked into Taylor's lens and did my thing. The pasty bake-off is open to restaurants and private bakers. There will be 2 rounds of elimination. A substantial cash prize is up for grabs, though organizers can't confirm the amount until the final underwriting for it is in place. Expect that announcement in the coming days. For your UP News, I'm Marzie Nowak. I paused and stayed still so Taylor would have a little padding to edit the clip to the end of our story. Okay, you'll be getting major points to Justin? I asked Jacob. Justin Lamore was the assignment editor of your UP News. I didn't have to check in with him as much as I'd done in the past. I let Jacob do that, while I concentrated on covering stories. Less chat with the newsroom made me happy and more efficient. Big stories had been oddly hard to come by in recent days, but after the summer we'd had, I wasn't complaining. Not really. Things had been quiet for the last few weeks, ever since my covenant destroyed Pedro Alvarado, the worst of the worst vampires. There were still bad seeds in Widow's Bay, but right now they were staying under the dirt. So, bake-off announcements and lighter feature stories had been our bread and butter the last few weeks. To be honest, I hoped that trend continued, at least for a little while. I needed a few normal days. The summer had been filled with epic battles. My hair had shifted from brown with streaks of white to white with remnants of brown. I've no doubt the turmoil of the last few months had something to do with that. Taylor packed up her gear, and I clicked open the locks on my Jeep. It wasn't yet noon, and we had a decent amount of material compiled. Maybe I'd even cut out early for a change. I was pondering taking a few hours off when my new producers interrupted my dreams of playing hooky. Jacob was on the phone and walked back to Taylor and me with a clear purpose. "Gotta go now." He had a look of eager excitement on his face. "What's up?" "Dead body." He was still new to the news game. A dead body could be natural causes. It didn't necessarily mean news or murder. Except this was Widow's Bay. And if you're placing a bet in my town, bet on mayhem for the win. Where? Ottawa Rivers. Chapter 2. Thanks to Jacob's connection on the Widow's Bay Police Department, he was friends with a rookie patrolman, we were there a few minutes after the police. Normally, Justin listened to the police scanner and pointed me in the direction of breaking news. Jacob made it so we could skip that step. Ottawa Rivers was as posh as Widow's Bay got. While I lived in the historic neighborhood with big yards and Victorian homes in various states of renovation, Ottawa Rivers was brand spanking new. The McMansion neighborhood was developed and mainly sold by Pauline's biggest rival in real estate, Dooneberry Development. The neighborhood was gated, and typically you'd need a code to get in. Currently, the gate was open, presumably to get the emergency vehicles in, so we scooted in as well. There were no other inroads to the fancy Ottawa Rivers neighborhood. It was designed to keep riffraff and media out while making it easy to buzz in Amazon delivery trucks. One home after another, with 3-car garages, trumpeted a brand-new level of bougie in Widow's Bay resident. We looked for the address, and I noticed high foyer windows above the arched entries over double front doors. I also spied ornate chandeliers behind the lofty glass. I was a fan of a pretty chandelier, don't get me wrong, but I did often wonder how they changed the bulbs and the light fixtures in these epic foyers. The homes looked like something Scarlett O'Hara might build if she was interested in 5,000 square feet, a theater room, and an unfinished bonus room over the 3-car garage. Be that as it may, the crime rate in Ottawa Rivers had to be next to zero, unless Lansing passed a law to ban golf shirts or something. If that happened, every dude on this block would be headed for the slammer. We arrived at the address. Police cars and ambulances were out front and in the circular driveway. "I wish we could get inside," Taylor said. "Not likely. This is going to take a while." I knew the drill. Byron Duluth was likely showing up in a few minutes, and no one was going to tell us anything until he was there. Bud Marvin, the chief of police, made it clear. Patrolmen and women weren't allowed to talk to the press. Even though the press these days was just me, thanks to the recent murder of the only other reporter in town. We'd be here a while before we knew what was what. I called Jacob to let him know we were here and had nothing new to report. "Jacob, can you start putting together the pasty story? Taylor and I will wait and get whatever we can, whenever they're ready to talk." "Will do. And update the newsroom. Yep, on it. I'll call Justin and let him know what we've got and what we're getting." "Great." A lot of stories required me to wait in the Jeep so I didn't freeze to death. But right now, the weather was gorgeous. Taylor and I leaned on the Jeep, outside, from a respectful distance. "Just get a few shots. It's going to be a while." "You should wear sunscreen," my young photographer cautioned. I have had so many sunburns in my 40 years that really, it's too late. As a kid, my mom would chastise me that sunburns were caused by having an inadequate base tan. It's shocking how good your skin looks based on that logic. Thanks. And yes, those were different times. Not bad for 40, eh? I hoped my silk pillowcase and tiny infusion of vampire blood was like a supernatural Botox injection, without the annoying side effect of bloodlust on the first count and possible paralysis on the second. Whoa. I didn't know if her shock was because I didn't look 40 or because 40 was ancient. I suspected the latter. My once dark hair had turned mostly white. 40? To someone in their 20s, I must look 100. Thanks. No, that hair, combined with you being fit, it's totally in style. Not if you ask Agnes. Who? Never mind. Agnes had somehow figured out how to order hair-dyeing kits online. One showed up last week. She offered no apology for using my credit card. I did not have the energy to explain Agnes to Taylor. Agnes, my verbose house cat, was a see-it-to-believe-it experience. We shot the breeze for a while, and then finally the twins arrived. The twins would take the body from the lodge and to the coroner's office for the exam. "Hey, guys." They both waved hello. Greenie and Graham Killicolio were transplanted from Hawaii. I didn't quite know how they'd decided the Upper Peninsula was home, or how they got the job transporting bodies for Chippewa County, but there it was. "Hi, Marzie," they said in unison as they entered the home. "For a small town, there are a surprising number of murders," Taylor observed. "True, but property values are low, the water is clean, and there's great fishing," I countered. Taylor was from Toledo, Ohio, and was going to school at the University of Toledo. Her summer break and internship had brought her here. Widow's Bay was tiny compared to Toledo, and Toledo small compared to Detroit. And yet Widow's Bay kept Greenie and Graham busy, me as well. Right. Taylor was a beauty, no question. I didn't think it would be long before she was in front of the camera. I wanted her to do a few stand-ups of her own. I thought it would be smart if she had a resume tape, or reel, as they called it. So far, though, she insisted photography was her passion, not being on camera. I put the Ottawa River's address in my phone, set on figuring out who owned the house when a neighbor approached. It was Karen Navarre, a fellow member of the Distinguished Ladies Club, and, to my surprise, resident of Ottawa Rivers. "I didn't know you moved here." "Yeah, when everyone else is downsizing, I decided to get the house of my dreams. I mean, why not, right?" "Right." "Whose house is that?" I asked. "Philip Lockwood." "Oh, wow. Really?" I stood up straighter. This might be something we needed to cover after all. The death of a prominent member of the community, no matter the manner, was news. "Yep. He was like the third person to move into our gated community. In fact, how'd you even get in? I thought the gate was supposed to be closed." "Emergency vehicles kept it open," I replied. She narrowed her eyes, but then couldn't resist talking. Most people couldn't, and Karen and I were in the same coven. If there was a good old girls' network, that was it in Widow's Bay. We just did our final walkthrough.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?